The first thing you should understand about emergency dispatch is that the map is the job. Everything else, the radios, the headsets, the protocol binders, the sleep deprivation, the bad coffee from the machine that hasn't been serviced since the building was rewired, all of it serves the map. When a call comes in, the map tells you where the caller is, who is closest to them, what road conditions look like, and which agency has jurisdiction. If the map is wrong, you are wrong. If the map is missing something, that something does not exist. I worked the overnight desk at a regional public safety answering point in the upper Midwest for 11 years. I'm not going to name the county. I will say it was rural enough that we covered 4 municipalities and roughly 900 square miles of farmland, forest, and lake frontage out of a single brick building behind a volunteer fire station. There were 4 of us on overnights, rotating 2 on, 2 off. The senior dispatcher when I started was a woman named Marlene, who had been doing the job since the system was still partly analog. She trained me. A lot of what I'm about to describe I learned from her without her ever quite saying it out loud. The mapping software we used was a county GIS overlay licensed through the state. It pulled parcel data, road center lines, address points, hydrology, and emergency service zones. When a 911 call came in from a landline, the address auto-populated. When it came in from a cell phone, we got a latitude and longitude with an accuracy radius, sometimes 10 feet, sometimes a quarter mile, depending on the tower and the handset. The system was not perfect. Cell coordinates would drift. Landline records sometimes lagged behind new construction. There were dead zones in the northern half of the county where calls would route through a tower across the state line, and we'd have to manually correct the jurisdiction. None of that was unusual. Every dispatcher in every county in this country deals with bad data. What I am going to describe is not bad data. The first call came in on a Tuesday in late October, somewhere around 3 in the morning. I remember because the heat in the building had cycled off, and I was wearing my jacket at the console. The ringtone for an incoming 911 line is a specific 2-tone chime, slightly louder than the administrative lines, and it cuts through whatever you're doing. I picked up inside 2 rings. The caller was a woman. She sounded middle-aged, calm, in the way that people are calm when they've decided not to be afraid yet. She said there was someone outside her house. She said he had been standing at the edge of her property for about 20 minutes and he had not moved. She said her husband was at work on second shift and would not be home for another hour. I asked for her address. She gave me a number and a road name. The road name I did not recognize, which by itself meant nothing. There are a lot of small private roads and seasonal lanes in the county, and I had not memorized all of them. I typed it into the system. The system returned no result. I asked her to spell it. She spelled it. I tried variations. I tried the road name as a township road, a county road, and a private drive. Nothing. I asked her for a nearby landmark, a cross street, the name of her township. She gave me a township I did recognize and a cross street I did not. I pulled up the township boundaries on the map and zoomed in on the area she described. The cross street wasn't there. The road wasn't there. There was a stretch of what the GIS layer showed as undeveloped state forest land, maybe 6 square miles of it, with no structures, no driveways, no addresses. I told her I was having trouble locating her. I asked if she could see any house numbers on the road from her window, any mailboxes she could read. She said her mailbox was at the end of the drive, and she could give me the number on it. She gave me a 4-digit number. I typed it in, along with the road name. The system returned no result. I asked her to stay on the line. I patched in the sheriff's deputy who was nearest to the township she'd named, and told him I had a possible prowler with a caller I could not locate. I gave him the cross-street name and asked if he recognized it. There was a pause on the radio. Then he said, with a particular flatness that I would later come to recognize, that he did not recognize it, but he would head in that general direction and try to raise her on the local frequency if she had a CB. She did not have a CB. I stayed with her on the line for almost 40 minutes. The deputy drove the grid of the township twice. He passed 3 farms whose owners he knew by name. He did not see any road matching the description she gave. He did not see any house with the porch light she said she had left on. At one point I asked her, as gently as I could, if she might be confused about where she was, if perhaps she was visiting someone, if she had recently moved. She said she had lived in the house for 26 years. Then she said in the same calm voice that the man had moved closer. He was at her porch steps now. She said she was going to hang up and get her husband's shotgun out of the bedroom closet. She hung up. I tried to call back. The line rang twice and then gave me a recorded message I had never heard before. It was not the standard out-of-service tone. It was a woman's voice, not automated, saying the words, "This number is not in the directory." Then it disconnected. I logged the call. I flagged it as unresolved. I noted the deputy's grid search and the negative result. I went home at 7 in the morning and I slept badly. I want to be very clear about something. In 11 years of dispatch, I had taken thousands of calls. I had taken calls from people who were drunk, people who were dying, people who were lying, people who were having psychotic breaks, people who were calling from inside closets while someone was breaking down their front door. I had taken calls from children who didn't know their own addresses. I had taken calls that turned out to be pranks and calls that turned out to be the last words I would ever hear from a particular person. I had developed over those years a kind of internal sorting system for what a call was. This call did not sort. The next night I came in early and pulled the recording. The audio was clean. The woman's voice was steady throughout. The road name she gave was clearly enunciated. The mailbox number was clearly enunciated. I wrote both down on a sticky note and I put the sticky note in my desk drawer. I told myself I would ask Marlene about it when she came in for her next shift. I did not have to wait that long. 2 nights later, I took a second call from the same area. Different caller. A man this time older, with a slight accent I couldn't place. Not foreign, more like a regional pattern I'd heard before but couldn't situate. He said his wife had fallen down the cellar stairs and was not responsive. He gave me an address. The road name was different from the first call. The township was the same. I typed the road name into the system. The system returned no result. I asked for a cross street. He gave me a cross street name. I checked it against the map. It did not exist. I asked for the nearest town. He named a town that was in our coverage area. I asked him for the route he would take to get to that town from his house. He described in clear detail a sequence of turns onto roads that I could not find on any layer of the GIS, ending at a county road I did know. According to his description, his house was somewhere inside the same 6 square miles of state forest where the first caller had been. I dispatched EMS to the nearest known address along the county road he'd named as his exit point. I asked him to stay on the line. He stayed on the line for 14 minutes, describing his wife's breathing, describing the position she was in at the bottom of the stairs, describing the basement, which he said had a poured concrete floor and a workbench his father had built. He was not panicking. He was the way people are when they have been through something like this before, or when they have been preparing for it for a long time without admitting it to themselves. EMS arrived at the address I had given them. There was no house there. There was a turn-off onto a fire access lane, gated, padlocked, with the lock intact and rusted in a way that suggested it had not been opened in years. The paramedics walked the lane for about 100 yards with flashlights. They found nothing. They radioed back that the call was unfounded. While they were doing this, the man on my line said his wife had started breathing again. He thanked me. He hung up before I could ask him anything else. When I tried to call back, I got the same recording, the same woman's voice. This number is not in the directory. When Marlene came on shift the next night, I waited until our second coffee. And then I told her about both calls. I told her about the road names. I told her about the recording. She did not react the way I expected. She did not look surprised. She looked tired, in a specific way, the way a person looks when something they had hoped was finished has turned out not to be finished. She asked me how I had logged the calls. I told her I had logged them as unresolved with negative field response. She nodded. She said that was the right way to log them. She said I should keep logging them that way if more came in. She said I should not, under any circumstances, attempt to drive out to the area myself, even off duty, even just to look. She said I should not discuss the calls with the deputies beyond what was strictly necessary for dispatch. She said I should not call the numbers back. I asked her why. She said that the area those calls were coming from used to be on the maps. She said that when she had started the job almost 30 years earlier, there had been a township out there, a small one, maybe 60 people. a one-room post office, a Lutheran church, a feed store. She said it had been administratively dissolved sometime in the late 70s, before her time, and the land had reverted to the state. She said the roads had been decommissioned, the addresses retired, the parcels rolled into the state forest. She said this was not unusual. There were ghost townships all over the rural Midwest. Places that had simply emptied out and been folded back into the map as blank green space. What was unusual, she said, was that this particular ghost township still called. I asked her how often. She said it varied. Sometimes there would be a year of silence. Sometimes there would be 3 calls in a month. She said that when she had started, the previous senior dispatcher, a man named Hollis, who had since died, had given her the same instructions she was giving me. Log the call, dispatch a token response to the nearest real address. Do not pursue, do not call back, do not visit. I asked her if anyone had ever pursued. She said yes. She said that in 1994, a deputy named Ray Kowalski had taken a call about a child locked in a car. Ray had been a stubborn man and a good cop. He had pulled the call audio and listened to it twice, and then he had driven out to the fire access lane and cut the padlock with bolt cutters from his trunk and walked in on foot. The lane went about half a mile back, through second-growth pine, before it opened onto what Marlene called a clearing. Ray had described the clearing over his radio. He had described a row of foundations, concrete pads where buildings had once stood. He had described a steel-framed sign lying face down in the weeds. He had described the air as smelling like wood smoke even though there was no fire. Then his radio had gone quiet. Not cut off. Quiet. As if he had set it down. They had found his cruiser at the gate the next morning. They had not found Ray. They had searched the state forest for 9 days with dogs and helicopters and volunteers. They had found a boot, his boot, about 2 miles north of the clearing, set neatly upright on a stump, as if someone had placed it there. They had not found anything else. His name, Marlene said, had been removed from the county personnel rolls about 6 months later, after the search was officially suspended. His widow had received a settlement and had moved out of state. The case had been closed administratively. I asked her if there had been calls about Ray, from the area. She did not answer me directly. She said only that I should be very careful in the months to come about who I recognized on the line. I want to describe the building now, because I think it matters. The dispatch center occupied the back half of a single-story brick structure that the county had bought from a credit union in the 80s. The front half was used for storage of voting machines and old tax records. Our half had 4 consoles, a small kitchen, a bathroom, and a server room that we were not authorized to enter. The mapping software ran off a county server in a different building 12 miles away, but the local terminal kept a cached copy of the GIS layers that updated every 6 hours. The cached copy was what we worked from during the gaps when the connection was unstable, which was often. About a week after my conversation with Marlene, I started looking at the cached GIS data on my own time. I am not a GIS technician, but I had picked up enough over the years to navigate the layers. I exported the township boundaries for our coverage area and compared them to the boundaries listed in the state's historical records, which were publicly available online. The current map showed a continuous block of state forest land, where Marlene had said the dissolved township used to be. The historical record showed the same. There was no inconsistency in the official data. What I did find, buried 3 layers down in the cached GIS package, was a file labeled with a string of numbers and the suffix _legacy_retired. It was a road centerline layer that the system did not display by default. When I toggled it on, a thin web of dotted lines appeared inside the green block of state forest. Roads, maybe a dozen of them, with names. The names were faded in the attribute table, marked with a status code I did not recognize. 2 of those names matched the road names my callers had given me. I sat at my console for a long time looking at that map. The dotted lines did not connect to any current roads. They formed a small grid in the middle of nothing, a pattern of streets around what looked like it had once been a town center. The grid was bisected by a creek the current map still showed. The creek was real. I had crossed it 100 times on the county highway that passed nearby. I turned the layer off, and I did not turn it on again for several weeks. The third call came in early December. It was a child. A girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old. She said her mother had not come home from work and she was scared. She said it was getting dark. She gave me an address on a road that, by now, I recognized from the legacy layer. I asked her very gently where her mother worked. She said her mother worked at the feed store in town. I asked her what town. She named a town that had not existed in any administrative form since before I was born. I kept her on the line. I am trained to keep children on the line. I asked her about her day. I asked her what she had eaten for dinner. She said her grandmother had made stew. I asked her where her grandmother was now. She said her grandmother was in the next room, listening to the radio. I asked what was on the radio. She said it was the farm report. The county had not broadcast a farm report on any local AM station in at least 15 years. I asked her if her grandmother could come to the phone. There was a long pause. Then the girl said, in a voice that had changed slightly, that her grandmother had said I should stop calling. I had not called her. She had called me. I asked her what she meant. She said her grandmother had said that the lady at the desk should stop calling, because every time someone at the desk picks up, it gets harder for them to stay where they are. Then she said quietly that she was sorry, and she hung up. I sat at the console with the headset still on for I don't know how long. The other dispatcher on shift that night, a younger guy named Devin who had been with us for about 2 years, asked me if I was okay. I told him I was fine. I logged the call. I did not flag it as unresolved this time. I flagged it as a misdial, which was a category we used for calls that did not require any field response. I'm not sure why I did that. I think I did not want anyone else to listen to the recording. That night, driving home, I took a route I do not normally take. I went north on the county highway that passes the state forest. I did not stop. I did not turn onto any access lane. I just drove past, slowly, with my window cracked. It was 4:30 in the morning. The forest on either side of the road was black and still. About a quarter-mile past the gated lane the paramedics had walked. I thought I saw a light. It was deep in the trees, low to the ground, the warm color of an incandescent bulb behind a curtain. It was there for the length of a breath. Then it was not. I kept driving. I did not slow down. I want to talk now about the rules. Marlene had given me 3. Log the call, dispatch token response, do not pursue. Over the following months, as the calls continued, I worked out 2 more on my own, by trial and by observation, and I want to set them down here in the order I learned them. The 4th rule was about the recording. This number is not in the directory message that played when I tried to call back. I learned the hard way not to listen to it more than once. The first time I had heard it, on the night of the first call, I had been startled, but not affected. The second time, after the man with the fallen wife, I had let it play through twice, trying to understand if it was a real recording or some kind of routing artifact. That night I had a dream I do not want to describe in detail. It involved a hallway in a house I had never been in, and a woman at the end of the hallway who was facing away from me, and the certainty, in the dream, that if she turned around, I would know her. After that, when I called back and got the recording, I hung up before the second sentence. I told Devin to do the same. He listened to me without asking why. I think he had already figured out more than he was letting on. The 5th rule was about names. I noticed, after about the 6th or 7th call, that the callers never gave me their names unless I asked, and when I asked, they answered. They always answered. I started, against my better judgment, to write the names down. I kept a small notebook in my desk drawer, separate from the official log. By the end of that first winter, I had 11 names in it. In March, I started checking the names against the county's historical death records, which were available through the library's genealogy department. I did this on my days off. I told myself I was being thorough. I told myself I wanted to understand. Of the 11 names, 9 appeared in the death records for the dissolved township, with dates of death ranging from 1948 to 1974. The remaining 2 I could not find. One of those 2 was the woman from the first call. The other was the child. I did not know what to do with that information. I put the notebook back in the drawer, and I did not look at it for a long time. The calls continued through the spring. They were not frequent, maybe one every 3 or 4 weeks, sometimes more. The content varied. A barn fire, a man having chest pains, a car off the road into the creek, a woman in labor. Each call was internally consistent. Each caller was calm in the particular way I had come to recognize. Each call ended with the caller either hanging up or, in 2 cases, simply going silent on the line until I disconnected. We dispatched token responses. The deputies and paramedics had long since stopped asking questions about the addresses. They would drive out to the nearest real road, sit there for a few minutes, and clear the call. I want to describe one of those calls in particular, because it is the one that changed things. It was a Sunday night in late April. The call came in at 2:14 in the morning. The caller was a man. He sounded younger than most of them, maybe in his 30s. His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it that the others had not had. He sounded confused, not about his situation, about being on the phone. He said his name was Ray. I want to be careful here. He did not say his last name. I did not ask. He said his name was Ray, and he said he was lost. He said he had walked into the woods on a call and he could not find his way out. He said the sun had been going down when he started and now it was dark, and he could see lights through the trees. But every time he walked toward them, they moved. I asked him what kind of call. He said a child locked in a car. I did not say anything for a long moment. I think Devon, at the next console, noticed something in my face, because he turned and looked at me and put his coffee down. The man on the line asked me if I could hear him. I said yes. He asked me if I could help him. I want to tell you that I followed the rules. I want to tell you that I logged the call, dispatched a token response, and let him go. But I did not. I'm going to be honest about this. I asked him to describe what he was seeing. He described a clearing. He described concrete pads in a row. He described a sign lying face down in the weeds. He said the air smelled like wood smoke even though there was no fire. I asked him how long he had been walking. He said he didn't know. He said it felt like he had been walking for a long time. He said his radio had stopped working a while ago. He said he had set it down somewhere, and then he had not been able to find it again. I asked him what year he thought it was. The line was quiet for a moment. Then he asked me to repeat the question. I repeated it. He laughed, a small, uncertain laugh, and said it was 1994. He said it was September. He said he had a wife named Anne and a daughter who was going to start kindergarten the next week, and could I please call Anne and tell her he was going to be late. I did not call Anne. Anne Kowalski had remarried in 2002 and moved to Arizona. I knew this because Marlene had mentioned it once, in passing, in the context of explaining why we did not talk about Ray. I told the man on the line that I would do what I could. I asked him if he could find his way back to the gate. He said he had been trying. He said every time he started walking in what he thought was the right direction, he came back to the clearing. He said he had done this maybe 20 times. He said he was very tired. I asked him if he could stay on the line. He said his phone was almost dead. He did not have a phone. He had not had a phone. In 1994, on duty, he would have had a radio. He had said earlier that his radio had stopped working. I did not point this out to him. I do not know what I would have gained. I asked him if there was anything I could do. He said yes. He said he wanted me to do something for him. He said he wanted me to tell whoever sat at this desk after me that the clearing was bigger than it looked. He said the clearing kept going if you walked into it. He said he had walked for what felt like days in one direction, and he had not come to the edge. He said the foundations went on. He said there were more of them than there had been buildings. He said some of them were new. He said some of them had numbers carved into the concrete that he did not understand. He asked me to write that down. I wrote it down. He thanked me. He said he was going to keep walking. He said he thought if he kept walking in the same direction long enough, he would find the edge eventually. He said he had to believe that. Then he said one more thing, and this is the part I have not been able to stop thinking about. He said that he had seen other people in the clearing, not many, a few. He said they did not seem to see him. He said one of them was a woman in a nightgown holding a phone. He said one of them was an older man in coveralls, sitting on a foundation, with his head in his hands. He said one of them was a little girl, walking back and forth along the edge of the trees, looking at something he could not see. He said he thought there might be a desk in the clearing too. He said he wasn't sure. He said it was hard to see clearly because the light kept changing. But he thought, somewhere near the middle, there might be a desk with a phone on it. Then the line went dead. Not the recording, just dead. Open static, and then nothing. I did not try to call back. I sat at the console, and I did not move for I think a full minute. Devin asked me if everything was all right. I told him I needed a few minutes. I went to the bathroom, and I ran cold water over my hands until they stopped shaking. When I came back, I logged the call. I logged it as unresolved with negative field response. I did not write down the name the caller had given. I did not write down what he had said about the clearing or the foundations or the people. I have written it down here for the first time, and that is the only place it is written down. I worked for another 4 years after that call. The calls continued. I followed the rules. I did not pursue. I did not call back. I did not visit. When my callers gave me names, I wrote them in the notebook, and I did not check them against the death records anymore. I did not want to know which were old and which were new. Marlene retired the year after Ray called. She did not tell me she was going to. She just worked her last shift, and at the end of it she shook my hand and said I was the senior dispatcher now, and she walked out to her car. I saw her once after that, at a grocery store in the next town over, about 18 months later. She looked thinner. She did not seem to want to talk. She asked me if the calls were still coming. I said they were. She nodded and said she had thought they would. She said she had been getting some too. On her home phone, she said she did not pick up. She said I should not either if it ever started. But she said it like she did not believe it would help. I asked her what she thought the clearing was. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, she thought it was the place that happens when a place gets erased before the people inside it are finished. She said she thought the erasure was not as clean as the maps made it look. She said she thought the people in there were still trying to do the things they had been doing when the lines went away. She said she thought the phone calls were one of those things. She said she thought that was the part that scared her most. That it was not a haunting. That it was a job. That somewhere in the middle of that clearing there was a desk, and someone was still working it, and that the calls were not coming to us by accident. They were being routed. I asked her by whom. She said she did not know. She said she had stopped asking that question a long time ago. She said the only question she still asked herself was whether, when her time came, she would be one of the people walking the edge of the trees, or one of the people at the desk. I retired 2 years ago. I am writing this from a small house about 300 miles from the county where I worked. I chose the location carefully. There is no rural emergency service in this area. The nearest dispatch center is in a city of 400,000 people and routes through a regional consolidated center an hour from here. I do not have a landline. My cell phone is on a carrier I chose specifically because their towers do not cover the area where I used to work. 2 weeks ago, my phone rang at 3 in the morning. The number on the screen was the main administrative line at my old dispatch center, which I had not called in over a year. I did not answer. It rang 12 times and then stopped. There was no voicemail. The next night it rang again. Same number? Same time? I did not answer. Last night it rang again. This time I picked it up, but I did not speak. I just listened. The line was open. I could hear, very faintly, the sound of a chair creaking, the sound of a keyboard, the sound of someone breathing the way you breathe when you have been at a console for a long time, and you are tired, but you are still listening. And then, underneath that, in the background, I could hear a child's voice, very far away, saying something I could not make out. I hung up. I have not turned my phone off. I have not blocked the number. I do not know why. I tell myself it is because I want to know if it rings again. I tell myself it is because I want to be sure. But somewhere in the back of my mind I am thinking about the desk in the clearing. I am thinking about the chair, and the keyboard, and the headset. I am thinking about how Marlene asked herself which one she would be. I am thinking about how, in all the years I worked that job, I never once asked myself the same question, because I assumed the answer was neither. I am not sure that assumption was correct. The phone is on the table in front of me as I write this. The screen is dark. The ringer is on. It is 2:14 in the morning. I am going to sit here until it gets light. If it rings, I do not yet know what I am going to do. I think I already know who is on the other end. I think she is calling to ask me when I'm coming in for my shift.